Once again, good evening, everyone. So, hope you're enjoying the sessions. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who will be talking about shaping the role of data science and evolution towards prescriptive analytics as a key driver in revenue acceleration. So, please welcome Thomas Selvin and Nick Oswald, Chief Data Scientist at Iris.tv. Please give him a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our session. As I mentioned, as the introductory part mentioned, we work at Iris.tv. Since we're going through a use case here, I wanted to explain, first of all, a little bit about Iris.tv. And really the theme of what we're doing here today is we've harnessed large amounts of data, and with that data, we have started to do prescriptive analytics, which is sort of a higher end of the prescriptive analytics evolution, where one starts with descriptive analytics and looks backward at sort of what happened, and then predictive analytics that looks forward, and then the prescriptive part would be how can one shape the future given the resources that they have available to them, given the analytics that we have developed. So let me first, what I'll do is I'll walk through a little bit about Iris, then the formulation in mathematical terms, which makes it very, very simple to see what I mean by prescriptive analytics. And then what I really want to do is talk about some of the issues that we encountered on the way, moving towards getting some of our clients to accept the prescriptive analytics way of thinking, and to set out the conditions under which we think prescriptive analytics would thrive. And we'll also talk a little bit about the role of man versus machine in this process. And then my colleague Nick Oswald will actually walk you through a case study that we have prepared that shows you how we took a known event, a big sporting event that was about to happen, and gave prescriptions to our client how they might better perform. So Iris.tv, what we do is, for the most part, if you go onto a many different sites, you can watch a video. And what happens is there are additional videos that follow as a recommendation. And we do that primarily, but we also do automated data structuring, and then giving feedback to our clients, we do some business intelligence in analytics. The way that the way it really works is, if you go to someone's site, you'll start off by looking at a video, and at the completion, should you finish that video, you can go on and watch additional ones. And what Iris does is we're responsible for those recommended views. So the client will choose where to start the experience, and we will then go on to the others. And the idea, what we're trying to do here for a client, is get as many recommended views as possible. We're trying to increase the lift associated with an experience. So to choose a recommendation list that does not end at the first one or the second one, but really to extend the experience as long as possible. So back in 2011, Gartner put together this graph, which I find that very useful and something that we agree with, where one, on the horizontal axis, one is looking at the difficulty of preparing the analytics, and then the value that one can extract from that on the vertical axis. And so when we started taking our data, these large amounts of data, and distilling it into analytics, on the descriptive part, we could look back and say, how well did you perform? Then what we did is we sort of say, well, what are the characteristics of good performers and bad performers? And then we moved next to predictive, that said, given the way you currently are operating, what do we expect your experience, how your user will engage the site, how many videos will they watch? And so it's really telling you what we think will happen. And now we're shifting it and moving to the next piece along this curve, which is the prescriptive part, and saying, given that I have a specific goal in mind, and the goal doesn't necessarily have to be something good. It can be a risk mitigation exercise. I want to prevent something bad from happening. But the example we're going to walk you through is we want to increase our lift. And we want to increase our lift by a certain amount, and what can we do to get there? And so the prescriptive analytics is really saying, how can we make this happen? And so what we've identified is this term we call levers. And there are, if you look at the predictive model as having independent variables that one uses to predict the outcome or the goal, there are some things that the client has available to them that they can modify, levers that they can change. They can do more of this or less of that, put more resources towards something. And the idea would be that they will then take that modification of those levers to affect the output in the direction that they want to mitigate risk or to increase some value to the company. So really what we're looking at is changing those levers. So you have a client that says the goal, and in the example we'll give you, it's a big event is coming up and we want to maximize eyes on our site during the big event and following it as people sort of recap what happened. And so what we're trying to do is saying, given the resources that you have available, those levers, how can you get there? That's what we want to tell them. So if you look at it in a very simple mathematical way, if we assume that we are now past the descriptive analytics and now on to predictive, and I should mention that what we have found is that the evolution is a prerequisite that you have achieved the previous level of analytics. So before you can predict, you need to be able to historically measure your data. And before you can prescribe, you have to be able to predict. And so what we have here, if you look at just the simple example as y hat is your goal, lift is some function of one of your levers, x. And that's what the predictive side would say. Prescriptive flips that around and says, given a y star, a value of lift that I want to achieve, what is the appropriate value of x that that I may have the ability to change? And so a couple examples here would be, one example would be if your videos are poorly tagged, they don't have any sort of metadata that helps you with that, the idea would be what is the effect of not tagging or of tagging, and say what the effect would be if you go in and you were to tag all of your assets, all of your videos, I mean, then what would the expected value be on lift? And so what we're doing is by understanding the cause and effect between y and x, we're able to say what we think x should be given a value that the client has set as their goal. So if you look at the variables that are in the predictive equation as having there are really three types. Those are the exogenous model variables, those things that you can't change. You can't change the weather and the time of day, and they're just some things that are helpful for the predictive, in the predictive sense, but they're not something that the person who is implementing these prescriptions can really move. A second type would be immovable levers. They are things that can be moved, but perhaps not by the individual that you're handing it to. Could be someone else's department, or there are just some things that you can't control. You don't have the resources to change them. What we're really trying to do is take that model and isolate those levers that the client can move in the direction that would help them to achieve the goal that they have in mind. So I gave you an example of just a single variable, just setting some x, some variable that, some lever that one can pull, but it doesn't need to be just a single lever. One can look at multiple levers. And what I've done here for those students of economics may recognize this frontier type approach where we look at these curves and say, suppose I wanted to achieve y star, I want to increase my lift by 20%. Then what mix of lever 1 and lever 2 will allow me to achieve that? And it could be a range of values, so that you could achieve it by putting very little change on x1 and a lot on x2 and so forth. And so it allows them, gives them a suite of options that they can explore. And so what one could look at then is say, the client could then, understanding their business probably better, that they may be able to change one lever easier than another and therefore choose the appropriate place along that curve. And then there are different values of y star that said, suppose I want to achieve a higher level of lift or even higher level of lift. The one thing that's important here is that there are bounds on this, there are constraints. There are certain values of the levers that you can move your levers, but there are limits to how much you can move them. And additionally, there are just some goals that are unachievable. One can't turn a site that has 100 views per day into 1 million overnight. That would be something that we see as being a limitation, constraint. So what we're trying to do in our process is to really model the predictive part, and then go and look and say what combination of levers can we use to achieve the goal that you've set under constraints. Okay. So for this to succeed, there are a few things that, these are the conditions that we found where in some cases this works, in other cases it doesn't. is first of all, you have to know what your constraints are and what the levers are. And that's usually done through some kind of interaction with the client or a better understanding of the business that you're supporting. You also need to be able to understand the way that the X's affect the Y's, the way that the independent variables, the levers, affect your goal, should you change them. And so you need to understand what that relationship is and infer or get with some reasonable amount, some acceptable amount, understand that changing the lever X does have an effect on Y. So establishing cause and effect is something that statisticians often do, and to ensure that that is the case before one starts prescribing that you move the levers. And then also go back one. The consumers, of course, have to be able to move the levers that you're talking about. And what's important that we're finding is that there also has to be a feedback loop. That if you look at this evolution of the analytics from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive, all of those things need to be in place with the appropriate bridges between them. You first need to be able to understand how to model the past, and then how to understand and use the relationship between the levers and the output. And you also, of course, which is useful, is to have the subject matter expertise on the side of the recipient of these analytics. If you look at that one of those curves I talked about, the ones that understand the business better can choose the appropriate point along that curve in which they might implement to achieve the desired goal. And if the individual receiving this information starts to implement this and gives you feedback on it that this is working, then that will help you improve the process of the feedback loop, where one takes the raw data, big data, turns it into eventually prescriptive analytics, implements it, and gets a feedback on how well that performed, because they are estimates of how they perform. It is a model looking back historically and trying to turn that into something prescriptive. So the whole feedback loop kind of looks like this. One starts, first of all, with your historical data to develop the descriptive analytics. And then you look at the different model variables, which include the exogenous ones, the levers you cannot move, and the ones that you can, and come up with your predictive model. And then talking with the client who is the recipient of the prescriptive analytics, say, what do you want to do, and what are the constraints on the levers that you have available to you, and then turn that into something prescriptive. They can then add their subject matter expertise to that and say, these are certain ranges that are unavailable to us in terms of levers, or just having a better understanding of how to use that information we're furnishing to them. And then they implement it, and then the feedback loop happens again, because now they've implemented it, and now you're generating more data and looking at that as sort of a spiral process. So that's kind of the environment in which it works, is really the cooperation of the recipient in understanding that feedback is important, and also, most importantly, is identifying those levers that can be moved. So given that overview of the prescriptive analytics, I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Nick Oswald, who will talk a little bit about this case study where we actually prescribed some specific actions that a client might do to increase their lift.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, so first of all, just to go over a little bit of background on this case study. It's the week before the NBA Finals. Our client is a major sports client, so they show all sorts of different types of sporting videos. And they're coming to us and basically saying, you know, we're trying to increase our lift. How can you provide some recommendations and prescriptions on how to increase our lift, especially during this pivotal moments where they're going to already get a lot of views for the NBA Finals, but we want people to stay even longer on our site. And so you're probably familiar with this graphic on the top. So what this user is doing is they're seeing the initial view, and then they're watching 3 other videos directly after. And so just to kind of help with this conversation, we're going to define video lift as the number of recommended views over the experience. So for this example, it would be 3, because they saw 3 recommended videos compared to the 1 initial video that they first started seeing on the site. And so for this client, there are 5 potential levers that they could use, of which 3 we're going to highlight in this case study. The 3 being correcting the supply-demand imbalance, adding video category metadata, which I'll get into a little further in the presentation, and reducing the average length of the assets, so the amount of time that it takes to complete a video. So in this conversation, when you this presentation, when you see the word asset, we're referring specifically to video. And so as you see in this specific prescription, they're ordered from the most likely to increase video lift to the least likely, and so there's just a much greater effect on the first 3 rather than the last 2. And so what we would do is what we would do in developing the prescriptions is provide additional analytical visualizations that they can use to then correct these 3 deficiencies in their video library. One of these additional visualizations that we can use is a heat map, and show. So later on in the presentation, I'll show you what this is, and it's measuring by the time of day and the day of the week the focal points of when people are watching videos on their site, so that they can implement this in a timely fashion. And so first off, when you looked at those five levers, it was correcting the supply and demand imbalance. And so what this person has is that some of their videos are categorized, and what you can see for this specific time frame is that they have a surplus of demand in NFL and NHL videos, and they have a shortage of supply for NBA videos. So what we would recommend is that during this time period, you should show much more NBA videos, because people are already going on your site. They're going to watch NBA videos. They'll probably be more likely to continue watching videos related to the NBA as opposed to other sports. And so additionally, the second prescription was to categorize data. And so for this client, some of their videos have categories and some of them don't. The categories, some examples would be whether it's like in the other visualization, if the video is part of the NBA or NHL, NFL. So what you can see here is that if the client can categorize their videos, then there's going to be an effect on lift of about 10 to 15%. So which is huge. And so there isn't. We understand that for a lot of our clients, they have a pretty extensive video library, and that they can't necessarily tag all of their videos as being in certain categories. And so what we would recommend is, specifically during this time period, is tag the videos that are related to the NBA first, because that's where you're going to see the highest lift. And so the third prescription of the 5 that I'm going to focus on today is the length of the asset, the length of the video. As you can see here, people complete the video longer if it's shorter, if it's less than 3 minutes long. And so, in addition to the other prescriptions that we made, we would recommend to show or produce more content that is 3 minutes or less in length. We're not saying necessarily to cut their content into 3-minute chunks, because the specific content might not lend itself to being of 3 minutes of length. But for new content, we would say try to produce something that's shorter in length, because your audience is just losing interest after 3 minutes. And so the last visualization is a heat map, And what this does is on the x-axis is the days of the week, so starting from Sunday to Saturday, and on the y-axis is the time during the day, so starting from midnight of that specific day to 11:59 during that day, 11:59 p.m. And this is from the client's perspective. So for this client, they're based on the East Coast, so it's Eastern Daylight Time. And what you can see here is the green is a greater number of experiences, of views. The red is a lesser number of experiences or views. You can see around Monday, starting at noon towards the end of the day, more people are going on their site and watching videos. And so what we would say to this client is try to fix these issues with your data before Monday at noon so that you can see the most video lift. And this kind of makes sense because people are coming back from their vacation, from their time off during the weekend. They're coming back to work, and they're watching these videos usually during lunchtime. And lunchtime being starting noon on the East Coast through about 3 or 4 p.m. On the West Coast. So to summarize this case study, we would recommend to fix the supply-demand imbalance, add category metadata, basically categorize your assets or videos, and produce content that is less than 3 minutes of length. And if you can do that before Monday at noon, that would be great. If you do it earlier, that would be even greater. But yeah, that's what we would say. And for just kind of the final 2 slides, there's been a lot of talk recently in the press and just, overall about AI and kind of the scare of AI is going to take over a bunch of jobs, and there's not going to be any room for people to work and kind of make a livelihood. And kind of our view on that is that there's a movement, or you can see yourself on a scale of between man and machine. You can either do everything manually with people, or you can do everything automated with a machine. And the way we approach it is that we try to start more on the man side, so that we can explain to our clients what we're trying to do, and then kind of slowly move them into more automated fashion, where we can leverage big data and technology to automate basically bad or inefficient ways of managing their business and provide more value. And so I recently read this book called The Inevitable. It came out about a month or 2 ago. And I really like this one quote, and I thought this was really relevant in today's kind of machine learning AI type of phase. This is not a race against the machines. If we race against them, we lose. This is a race with the machines. And I think that's what we're trying to do really at Iris. We're trying to combine our expertise with the machines to help our clients in the best way possible. So with that, I would like to open up to any questions that anyone may have.
I think it really is a short step. In fact, if you look at that chart, it looked like it was a big change in difficulty, but the real point is that you have a baseline of both your descriptive and proofing capabilities that you don't have to do all of that yourself. As long as you understand the needs of the client and the rest of it.
Any other question? Okay, we'll take one last.
So the audience engagement time is kind of favorable on Monday afternoon, right? Is this only for sports article, or it's true for politics and other story too? Okay. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, any other question? Okay. Thank you so much for the wonderful speech. And I hope